Hi all, I'm Professor Tina Good, and this video is going to be discussing brainstorming and drafting while developing a writing project. Listen, writing is just like any other creative activity. We should not think of it as something that we inherently know and can do without, developing skills and techniques, just like any other artist would have to do, any other athlete would have to do, an actor would have to do, any sort of, activity that requires, some kind of talent and expression needs some kind of training and developing of skill and technique. So this class, I'm hoping, will begin to help you develop those strategies, those techniques that work best for you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have developed a PowerPoint for you as we talk about these two points in the writing process. And I will be developing other videos later on that discuss other points of the writing process. But understand that while I am showing you sort of textbook ideas about the writing process, how to develop your writing, know that whatever I'm saying, you have to be able to customize for you and what works best for you in order to develop, that idea of expression through writing. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen and let's get started. Okay, all right. So again, as I said, this video is on brainstorming and drafting. But first, let's talk about the writing process itself. Okay, first of all, I want you to understand that it is not a linear process, right? It's not first you do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do that, right? It would be nice if that's the way it was, but it's not. In fact, what we call it is an iterative process. What does that mean? That means that as you're, doing part of the process, it will cause you to think about things that you've done in the past. You'll go back. That will then circle back and give you ideas for the future. And so it's more, instead of a line like this, it's more of a line like this, right? Kind of like, remember when you were a kid and you had a slinky, right? It kind of is more like that than a straight across process. So finding what works for you um, in that sort of iterative process, allowing yourself to have enough time to experience that will help you not only feel more comfortable with your writing process, but hopefully lead you to, a product that you are happy with. Okay. So I'm still going to describe this in a linear sort of way, but just know that it's not quite that simple. Okay. This is just giving you the steps. All right. So the first thing you got to do when thinking about what you're going to write is, what are you going to write about? Okay. So in some occasions, if you're just writing for you, if you're writing a creative experience, maybe that's just something you're going to create on your own, right, in your own brain, and you're going to look at life, you're going to look at your experiences, whatever that you're going to draw from. um, Most often in college, though, they're going to be giving you an assignment. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is sort of understand that assignment and what is being asked of you. Okay, so your topic is somewhat given to you, although a lot of times assignments are so broad that you still have to find your topic within that assignment. Okay. Brainstorming is that act that causes you to come up with ideas. Okay. So it is, storming the brain, right? The worst thing that you can do is just put it aside and not think about it. And so we're going to talk about strategies of brainstorming to stimulate the brain to start thinking about your project and to start coming up with ideas even before you start writing. Drafting is that what we call that idea of actually writing down your page. Okay, so beginning, from your blank page to writing, drawing from those ideas that you generated when you were brainstorming. Okay, organizing is beginning to take those ideas and organize them into some coherent form using paragraphs, going from one point to the next point to the next point, whether it's a creative piece or an analytical piece. This is still going to be important, right? You just can't throw all the ideas on the page and hope they make sense, right? You have to sort of organize them into some kind of order that makes your piece reader friendly. Okay, revising is that thing that you do after you've drafted, right? And you go through and you think about, like, is it meeting the assignment? Do I want to take a different point of view? So revising is sort of this holistic kind of rethinking of your essay, making sure that you have everything that you need. Okay. Um, Proofreading. Proofreading is different from revising, and proofreading is going through your paper and making sure that it's reader friendly with regard to grammar, with regard to sentence structure, with regard to paragraphing, making sure that your introduction is attention getting, that your conclusion does what you need it to do, right? And so, proofreading is like that last minute polishing. I'll have videos both on revising and proofreading. They will be separate videos because they are separate activities. Okay. And then reflecting. This happens all of the time in life, where you complete your project or you complete whatever it is that you're working on, and then you think, okay, I did that. What worked well, right? Am I happy with what I came up with? What worked well? And what would I do differently next time? Okay, so sort of what did you learn about you, about your project, while you were writing it? Okay, so in other areas of life, it might be called debriefing, but we call it more sort of reflecting because it's an internal sort of looking at what you did, what you learned while you were doing it, in multiple ways. Okay. All right. So let's focus now mostly on brainstorming. Okay. So what do we got to do? We got to get started. Okay. So yeah, like I said, like maybe you're writing a creative and you don't have a specific assignment, and that's great. So then you have to kind of go about life and be in this idea of looking at experiences and going like, oh, that could be something that's interesting to write about. But assuming that, you have an assignment, and you will have an assignment always in this class, the first thing you have to do is make sure that you understand the assignment, right? Read it carefully. A lot of times people don't read it carefully, and then they invest all of this time into writing something that doesn't meet the requirements of this assignment. And even though it might be a fine piece of work, if it doesn't meet the requirements of the assignment, it's not going to be a passing assignment. So a passing product. So make sure that you understand the assignment, what the assignment is asking you to do, like what is required of the assignment, and make sure that you meet the requirements of the assignment, whether it's page length, whether it's having page numbers on there, whether it's having a title, as well as meeting the topic. So just take some time and understand what the assignment is asking you to do. Okay. Then there is this thing that we call creative tension, right? And this is where, many of you are going to experience some kind of, perhaps, what we might call it, anxiety or nervousness. And maybe you start telling yourself, I'm not a good writer, I can't write, and that's just sabotaging yourself, right? Just understand that tension that you're having, that's what you're supposed to be having. There is not a single thing that you do creatively that does not generate that tension, what we call creative tension. Okay, but that's a good thing. It is from that tension that creative expression comes, right? But we have to learn how to keep that at bay, right? So that we keep that tension so that our creative juices are running, but that it doesn't become so overwhelming that we find ourselves in writer's block. Okay, so some things to think about with regard to creative tension. Listen, maybe you will never love writing. Maybe you won't. Okay. I myself have a very love hate relationship with it because that creative tension that I experience, it's not a comfortable feeling, right? But as you start working through it and then you come up with something at the end of that, right? And you breathe through that tension at the end, oh, that's a great feeling, right? And so how do we sort of navigate that? Well, first of all, understand that many studies have concluded that this idea of what we might label as nervousness or anxiety, you know, as opposed to what we might label as exciting, triggers the very same things in our brains, right? The very same synapses, the very same thing, right? So just maybe try relabeling that feeling, right, to excitement about, your ability to create something. Even if it's something that you're not really excited about creating, it's still going to be you that's creating something unique on the page. And that's something to be celebrated, right? And so then we have to sort of think, okay, what in the creative process works best for you? And we're going to be talking right now about what works for you, to get started. But later on, we're going to be also talking about what works for you as you're in the middle of it, what works for you as you're in the end of it. So, what works best for you? I can only give you suggestions about the process, and then you have to adapt it to, your own process. Okay. So, one of the things that you're going to be thinking about is um what do I have to do even before I start writing? Now, for me, one thing that works for me is if I have a fellow classmate, is that I talk to that person about the assignment. I just talk it out. You'd be surprised. Talking and writing are very similar as far as generating ideas in your brain, right? And it also makes the idea of writing a little less isolating if you're talking to somebody about the assignment and just throwing about ideas. Okay. Um, maybe that you don't have that available to you, right? Maybe you could talk to somebody else who's a friend but not really given the assignment, or so talking through it is a great way of handling it. um Walking, uh driving, any place where you sort of have a moment to kind of think about uh your assignment in a more meditative way, right? A lot of people like physical activity that's not too strenuous, but allows you to be kind of working out that tension a little bit while still thinking about your assignment. I've talked to many people who like vacuuming, for example. So you have that sort of white noise in the background. You have that sort of physical, but not too physical. And it gives your brain time to think. So find what works best for you to sort of generate ideas while managing, that tension at a certain level. And then think about what works best for you when you're finally going to sit down and actually write. What do you need in your writing environment? Do you need absolute quiet? Do you need to go to the library? Do you need to be in your room? Do you need to be in your home? Do you need quiet in your home? Do you write better in the afternoon? Do you write better in the middle of the night? Do you write better right when you wake up? Do you like lots of noise around you so you don't feel lonely? Do you like a TV in the background? Do you like a headset on with some kind of music? What works best for you to sort of keep that creative tension at bay, right? So you feel it, but it's not getting overwhelming, and you have this sort of safe space where you can start to express yourself. Maybe that changes with the type of writing that you're doing, right? So pay attention to that as well. And then, of course, we have to think about how do we take, this writing process of getting started and all of that and still meet a deadline, right? So like I have a lot of students who say, I write best, 2 hours before, it's due. Okay. There are reasons why you think that, right? Because the adrenaline that is like, oh my God, it's due and I have to get it done. That adrenaline can sort of mask that creative tension, right? But it's not the same. And yet, you have to meet that deadline, but maybe you're not doing your best work, right? And maybe you're not getting the satisfaction out of it that you could, especially if the project that you're doing requires more than 2 hours work, right? And let's face it, in college life, many of them are going to require more than 2 hours work, right? So it's this idea of yes, having a deadline is very inspiring, right? Many of us would not, complete anything if we did not have a deadline to do, right? So, but now we have to figure out what works best for us in our writing process to meet that deadline. Okay. And to not go off adrenaline to meet it, right? But that creative tension, which of course is going to be adrenaline provoking. There's no question about it, right? But you don't have to wait until the last minute to get that rush, right? And then, hate the idea of writing or the class itself or what you're writing about. All right, so brainstorming. The first thing that, I want you to do after you've, driven around or, whatever you've done to sort of start generating thought in your brain, um, is I just want you to sit down and I want you to just do a free write, right? It's what I call a brain dump. And that is just to sort of, you're not writing about your subject matter probably, but you're just writing about what's in your brain. Okay, just not a focus free write at all, just a free write. And that is because maybe you've got something in the background, right? That noise in the background that's hampering your creative ability. And believe it or not, if you can do this brain dump and maybe you'll find out like something's bothering you that you didn't even know is bothering you, and you write about it, and that sort of gets it out. It doesn't necessarily solve the problem, but it gets it out so you can put it over here and now focus on your writing project. But don't get lost in that, guys, right? Because if you do too much of that, then you're never going to get to your project, right? So do a brain dump of writing for about 5 minutes, but don't go over 10, right? Because if you go over 10, then you've distracted yourself away from the project. Okay. So no matter what, try to do at least 5 minutes, but don't go over 10. All right. Maybe just set a timer to make sure that you're meeting those sort of guidelines. Okay. Then what do you do? Okay. So the next thing that, what you've got in your brain from your talking and your driving and your vacuuming and your showering and your exercising or, whatever you did to sort of generate thought. Now you got to get it down in paper, right? And this can be an overwhelming moment, right? You have all of this. How do you get it down here? Okay. That can be an overwhelming moment. So what I suggest is what we call either listing or clustering. They're essentially the same thing. It just depends on how your brain works. So if you like a nice list, from top to bottom, then I suggest listing. And all you do is, again, take about a minute or two, go ahead and look at your clock, look at your watch, look at your phone, and go, I'm going to set a timer for 1 minute or for 2 minutes. And I'm just going to list all possible ideas that are up here in the head that I could write about. Just list for 1 minute. And just like one or two, you're the only one that has to read this. So one or two words so that when you look back at it, you're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Oh yeah, I know what that is. Right? List for 1 or 2 minutes, and keep going, because sometimes what we want to write about is not the first thing we think of, right? So just keep listing. don't know why my battery is going dead here. Let me see here. So the other thing that you can do is what we call clustering. And that's all that is just a spatially different thing. Okay. Um, So that's where you draw sort of like bubbles, right? And you just kind of draw them all over the you draw those you kind of draw those all over your paper, right? And so if you sort of don't like that idea of the formal listing, but you can just like draw things all over your page and like circle, right? That's a great thing to do too, right? Because then you can draw all of these things and then you have them all clustered, and I say do that for a minute or two, and then you could go back through and you go like, oh, well, see, this idea connects to this idea, connects to this idea, connects to this idea, right? So that's a nice thing to do too, right? You're essentially doing the same thing as listing, but because you have them all over the page, you can later on go back and connect those ideas a little bit more if you want to. Okay, so once you've done that, you go back. I'm sorry. You go back to your list, and sorry, I'm just having trouble with my battery. I just want to make sure it's working. You go back to your list, and you choose something on that list that you would think you would like to write about. Okay, and so then what you do is again set your timer. And now you're going to do a focused, what we call a focused free write. And you're just going to write about that topic. And I want you to write at least just free write. Don't do any reading. Don't do any proofreading. Don't just free write about that topic for at least 3 minutes. Okay. If you can't write about that topic for 3 minutes, that is not the topic you should be writing about. Okay. And by the way, all of this is assuming you got a 2 to 5 page paper. If it's longer than that, all of these things go up, right? But if you can't write about your topic at the get-go for 3 minutes, then that's not the topic for you, right? But let's say you can and you keep going. Don't go more than 6 minutes, right? You can keep going because you're generating ideas and that's fantastic. But don't go more than 6 minutes because then you're going to exhaust yourself and you're not going to want to go draft the paper. Okay. Now let's say you can't do that in 3 minutes, right? And I say rinse and repeat. Go back to your list, find another topic, try to do a focus free write on that for 3 minutes. And then keep doing that until you find the topic that you can write about for 3 minutes, right? Listen, don't do more than three of that because if you do more than three, you're still going to exhaust yourself, and maybe you need to go back and do some more reading before you can identify what topic you want to write about. Okay. Once you have your focus free write done, it's 3 to 6 minutes, go back in and highlight, right, the points and ideas that you want to be sure that you bring up in your project, right? Just go through, circle it, use a highlighter, whatever works best for you, and then close that document. Save it, close it, and go into your drafting state. Okay. All right, so drafting. Now, perhaps many of you have been taught to outline your ideas. Okay. For some people, that works. So if that works for you, go ahead and do that.